Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk, just saying.
What a topic of conversation that has been for the past several weeks.
I just had the most fascinating conversation with Rachel Janfaza yesterday. Do you know who Rachel is?
Yes. We've done a Substack 5 before.
Love her. And she just really just gives so much insight into your generation about how they're viewing political violence and how they're viewing life post Charlie Kirk, etc. We also talked about trad wives, trad husbands. And of course, the Erica Kirk thing came up because for him, Charlie Kirk never wanted his wife to have a role at a place like Turning Point, right? You know?
Yeah. Well, now, we're going to see. And I just put out a poll in the Substack earlier today giving people a choice of a deep dive. One of them is, how the right has started to court women. Like they feel so confident in the fact that they've secured the votes of young men that now they're shifting to young women. And Erica Kirk is a very strong figurehead for them to do that with. So
I don't know. Those pictures are circulating on social about her at the same beauty pageant with Lindsay Halligan. Pigs and giraffes. I told you. That's what I'm just saying. It all fits. It all fits. But hi, everybody. Olivia and I were just catching up. It's been another week. I know we say that every week. It's been a week. I'm always thrilled to hang out with Olivia, even if we can't reach out and actually touch each other, but we're remotely hanging out. Olivia keeps me grounded. Olivia inspires me. And I am always so grateful for her friendship and for her wisdom. And I wanted to talk about something very specific with Olivia, and she was so game for this. We've talked a lot about the Texas redistricting efforts. And we talk about what's happening in California with Prop 50, et cetera. But something happened, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, Olivia, what's going on? So part of the Texas redistricting efforts, as y'all know, is to create the opportunity for Republicans to gain these seats to be able to represent Texas in Congress. And lo and behold, a name from the past percolated up. I had seen her during the public hearings on the redistricting, but I felt like she had been kind of keeping a lower profile. And I said to Olivia, maybe not so much in Texas, but definitely nationally, do you guys remember a woman by the name of Katrina Pearson? Do y'all remember Katrina Pearson? Oh, look at those. Well, you can heart it, guys. I know you're not loving Katrina Pearson, but you are agreeing with me. So Katrina Pearson, if y'all remember, was a spokesperson for Donald Trump pre-2016. She was an activist in the Republican Tea Party movement. She's a Texan. She ran for office. She was endorsed by Ted Cruz and Sarah Palin back in 2014. For those of you that forgot, she actually did not work in the administration, but was working for a pro-Trump group. And then for Trump 2020, she was hired as a senior advisor. And she was at the Ellipse on January 6, 2021, Katrina Pearson. And then she apparently ran for the Texas House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's some
is
blocks.
there something
There's some blocks in there. So
go ahead, fill in the blanks.
So before all of this, before the ellipse and all that, she's run for Congress before. Run for Congress before, and she ran in 2014. She ran for Texas's 32nd congressional district, and then in 2021, after the ellipse, before she ran for state house, there was an opening in Texas 6th, which is it's another suburb of Dallas. So both of these districts are suburbs of Dallas. And she passed to run for that one, but she said she wouldn't rule out running for Congress in the future. So then after that was when she was kind of, nationally laying low a little bit. But then she ran for Texas House last year by primarying out an incumbent Republican who voted to impeach Ken Paxton.
Justin Holland is his name, right?
Justin Holland, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she's in this new seat. But she has been eyeing a congressional run for a long, long time.
So I was telling Olivia, because Olivia was crisscrossing the state of Texas, the hard worker that she is. She's also working closely with a young man that I admire deeply, Isaiah Martin, who was also impacted by the recent illegal gerrymandered maps that were introduced and voted upon in Texas in that whole redistricting fiasco. But during this redistricting efforts that were happening, these hearings were going on, and I started seeing Katrina Pearson popping up more and getting more and more vocal. And then when they were doing the debates in the Texas House, started seeing her speaking up more and more. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And lo and behold, what's happening now, Olivia?
Yeah. So to your point, she is on the redistricting committee in the Texas House, which is a very interesting committee for a freshman member of the state house to be on. But she was on this committee, and she was very specific about who she was going after in these hearings. And the two people in particular who she very, very much sparred with during these hearings were Jasmine Crockett, who also represents a district in Dallas, and Colin Allred, who represented Texas 32, which is the same district that she had previously run for. So after this happened, I was already kind of eyeing her because she went after Colin a little bit harder than you would expect her to, especially because at the time, Colin is a very polite person. And so it made complete and total sense to me when they voted to pass these redistricted maps. Katrina Pearson gave one of the closing speeches on the Texas House floor about why they were passing these maps, insulting the Democratic Party, and about the future of the Republican Party and how it was a multiracial coalition. And so it became very clear to me that Katrina Pearson was setting herself up and positioning herself to run potentially in the new Texas 32, a district that she previously ran for, which has now gone likely from a safe blue seat to a safe conservative seat. It's currently represented by a Democrat. And it now
because of the new map. Because of the new map, you think it's now gone safe conservative, safe red?
Yes, because of the new map, it will likely go safe conservative, safe red. And it does include a good portion of her current state house district. So, you could argue that in the drawing of those maps, there was someone specific that they had in mind when they created that district.
And listen, all kidding aside, this is why I wanted to talk about this with you, Olivia, and with all of you that are tuning in. There are no coincidences, folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the DOJ sent that bullshit letter from Harmeet Dillon from the Civil Rights Division claiming that she was going to sue Texas for the, quote, illegal gerrymandered maps with questionable districts, 4 of them, need I remind everybody that those were Republican-drawn maps that were already subjected to litigation that Democrats had been doing. So the Republicans had drawn illegal maps, and now they wanted even more illegal maps, which is what was the result. And if you think that these are not rewards to loyal MAGA Trump Republicans, you don't have to look any farther than Katrina Pearson, people.
Yep.
It is a direct reward for somebody like Katrina Pearson. Now, the thing that really set me off, and you touched upon it a little bit, Olivia, and I want you to explore it a little bit more because you were there and you were witnessing the shit. I really took umbrage, Olivia, with Katrina Pearson's attacks on the arguments about these new districts or these new maps stealing the ability to have adequate representation for communities of color. Katrina Pearson was gaslighting people, including people of color, when she was saying, oh, well, how can you possibly argue that your vote is being taken away if you still have the option of voting for the person you want to vote for? Like, that's not it, Katrina. But I felt so kind of put off by that because not only did I think it was gaslighting, but, she's also half Black. Like, I'm hearing this and I'm hearing her say this and I'm like, you know what? It's like, it doesn't sit well with me the way that she was going after people for that.
Well, I can speak to this from like my personal perspective because, I'm half Mexican. I grew up in rural Texas in a more conservative congressional district. that's been represented but by a white person, even though it's a majority Latino population area, was represented by white people for most of my life. And so I think that the thing that really irritates me about this conversation is that Republicans drew these maps based off of the 2024 election results, and they took particular note of how Latino voters voted last year. And they drew these maps so that I personally believe they can make the argument in court that these are now majority Black or majority Latino congressional districts so that they're more representative. Because what they did is something that, any campaign, when a candidate's deciding whether to run in a district or not, the question that they ask is not, what is the population of the district? It is, what is the voting population of the district? So you can draw a congressional district that population-wise is a majority Hispanic congressional district, but when you look at the portion of people in those districts who are actually voting, it's a majority white district. And so that's a piece of context here that a lot of people are missing, is that they drew these to be either a majority Black district or a majority
quote,
Latino
unquote.
District, quote unquote. But in reality, the majority of voters that live in those districts who are voting in every election are white. And so that's a layer to this that a lot of people really don't talk about.
Which is why I'm grateful, and I know everybody else who's tuning in right now is grateful that we have you, Olivia, because you do understand the nuances of this. And I think, to your point, they do that so they can make the facially superficial argument that they're not stealing these votes from the communities of color. But if you were to scratch the surface, to your point, you would see that it's still not an accurate representation of these communities. One of my hopes is, although it's, a little bit not so strong, is the litigation allows for, the digging deeper and going to the true intent and the way that these maps were done as to, getting to the bottom of it. But the problem is, for example, those bullshit Republican maps from 2022, 2021, right? Those just went to a bench trial 2 months ago, 3-4 years later. So litigation won't save us, right? Meaning people still need to go out and register, and they still need to go out and vote for the right candidate, because the litigation will not stop these maps from being in place and in the span of time for 2026, right? And such. And so we really got to be careful. Olivia, could we take like a little bit of a detour? Could you get us caught up to speed on Isaiah? I'm a big fan of Isaiah Martin. I want to know, because I know that his congressional district that he was running for was impacted by these new maps.
Yeah, they redrew District 18. It kind of combines a neighboring congressional district that was a diverse district with District 18 to make kind of one larger district that kind of encompasses a lot of the voters of color in this area into one packed district. But Isaiah's doing good. He's actually today filming his first TV commercial today. So he's doing good. We have a energized volunteer base. And I'm proud to see what he's been able to build. I think that Houston in particular, I often say, I truly genuinely believe this. I think that Harris County is the most important county in the country. And it's not just because I'm from Texas and I was born here and I'm biased. It's because when you look at Harris County demographically and politically, it is one of the most diverse counties in the country, not just from the communities we have here. We have a very large Latino community, very large Asian community, Black community, but also the political environment here. It really is. It's a swing county. Now, it's the biggest, bluest county in Texas, but it can swing left or right depending on the election year. And so I often tell people, you need to pay attention to what's happening in Harris County, because it'll give you a really good sense of where people are feeling on a national scale as a whole. And so right now, we have this special election in Texas 18 where Isaiah is running. And I think that election will give us a lot of insight into how voters are feeling, not just about politics, but specifically the Democratic Party in general, based off of what kind of candidate can win a primary in a safe blue congressional district like that. Now,
what's some of the feedback you've been getting about something like the James Tallarico throwing his hat into the ring? I interviewed him the day that he announced that morning. I've known him for a while, and there is something very authentic, very powerful about James, and I have a lot of hopes for him and his race.
Yeah, I actually, when talking about the Texas Senate primary, I find myself in a very unique position because we have two Democratic candidates who've announced in this race. We have James Tallarico, who I have known and been friends with for many years. He's actually the first Democratic lawmaker I ever met, all the way back in 2021. Yeah, like we've known for a very long time. And Colin Allred. I was a campaign chair for him last year during his election. And so I find myself in this very interesting position where for the first time, like I genuinely am in this instance, I don't work for either campaign. So I am a voter who, I have to be reached out to just like every other voter in this primary. And I could give you all the talking points about Colin Allred. I know that campaign, that election, like the back of my hand.
Sure.
But with James Tallarico, I think that, he's come into this as a real underdog because the reality is, he's running against Colin Allred, who raised $100 million last year. He, had an impressive performance on election night in terms of persuasion voting. Kamala Harris lost Texas by 15 points last year, which was a pretty bad year for Democrats. And he only lost by 9 with a very similar vote count. So he was able to do a lot of persuasion in that election. And, coming into this year with James, he kind of had 2 really big things that if he's going to be the person to win this primary, he's got to jump those hurdles, which is name ID and fundraising ability. And in the launch day where you talked to him, I think that he made it abundantly clear that he may be a perceived underdog, but I think he is anything but. He announced that he had an event that same day and 1,200 people showed up. I think it was 1,200 people showed up. He's holding
events. And their small dollar donations that day were wild that day.
Over $1 million in 12 hours. And mind you, James Tallarico is a state house member. Yes. He's a state house member. And the other thing that, another aspect of this people really don't think about, whoever the candidate is next year is going to have a very, very expensive general election. So if you're running in a primary, you really don't want to spend a lot of your money during the primary because you want to save it all for
the general.
Which, by the way, I'm very confident it's going to be
Ken Paxton,
who is the Republican nominee.
Yeah, and let people know, Olivia, I'm so sorry, folks. The seat that's at issue, folks, is currently held by Senator Cornyn. And so Cornyn is facing in the Republican primary at a minimum Ken Paxton. I think there might be somebody else who may or may not be throwing their hat in the ring too.
Allegedly, Congressman Wesley Hunt, who represents Texas 38, is supposedly throwing his hat in the district or in the race soon. I've heard that from several sources
Same. So you have an incumbent in Cornyn who's now suddenly adopted a lot of MAGA-esque language and kind of approach and things. And then you have the incredibly embattled and horrific Ken Paxton. And he has decided that he's going to be running for that. So whoever wins, to Olivia's point, the Democratic primary needs to be prepared to kick some serious. Yes, I agree. Ken Paxton should be in jail. That's the understatement of the century. Education is a lamp. Thank you for that. But whoever wins that Democratic primary, I think voters need to Olivia's point, they need to think bigger picture, long term, chess, not checkers. who do we want to be in that position to be running against potentially somebody like Ken Paxton in the general, and that will be driving people in the primaries, I think, as
Yeah,
Democrats.
it absolutely will. And to that point, the unique thing about Texas elections is that because Texas is such a large state, we have 32 million people that live here. Um, it falls into multiple different media markets for television and radio broadcasting, which is very, very expensive. It is very expensive to run TV ads in the state of Texas. So, if you're in a primary election, you're not going to want to spend money on television ads before you get into the general. And so James Talarico has something that a lot of candidates, I would say pretty much every candidate minus presidential candidates, has, which is the following that he has on social media is so large and so
Yes, it
impressive.
is.
I mean, millions of followers for a state house candidate. That is organic, unpaid advertising that can increase name ID and increase donations. And that is a serious asset that he has that I have not seen from any other candidate except, maybe Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and, AOC.
Yeah, and to your point, you might expect that from incumbents, but not even, because we have incumbents that are electeds in DC right now that have zero social media footprint and zero digital presence, even though they may be, for example, John Cornyn, for example. I think part of the reason why most of us do know who James is because he did conquer that digital battleground very early on, but he has earned it, in my humble opinion. There's a reason why he has gone viral on several occasions, because his delivery, his logic, his reasoning, his emotion, his passion, and his faith have resonated with so many people in different walks of life and from different backgrounds that they have felt something in him reflected of who they are. And that is why I think I have always stressed this concept of authenticity. I've always said one of my favorite sayings is you're better off being a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of someone else. I think voters, especially post-November 2024, have become even more acutely aware of when people are just doing lip service versus people who are actually genuinely caring about what happens to them and the outcomes in their lives. And I think when they look at somebody like James Talarico, they see someone who is unabashedly Christian, but not what I call Sunday Christian. Only on Sundays do we say that we're Christians, and the rest of the week we're total assholes and fascists. Like he's the real deal, and he's not embarrassed to lean into his faith at a time when Christianity is being weaponized and is almost viewed as being a weapon of hate, to be a wedge between communities. James has no problem saying, I am a proud Christian, right? And I feel like that is such an unusual but very cool thing that is resonating with a lot of people right now. So, again, the bigger picture vote for Democrats going into this primary is going to be maybe who's going to be able to kick Ken Paxton's ass next year in 2026.
Yeah. And you're 100% right. One of my best friends from high school, his mom, she is a Republican, and she called me about 2 weeks ago, to flat out tell me, she's like, "Look, I know that you know James Talarico. You need to tell him that he needs to run for something statewide. We need him to run
Wow.
for something statewide. I just love him to death." Um, and she was like, if you like, and she was like, and also I want to meet him when he comes to Houston. You need to pull some strings. I want to meet this guy. But I will say this about James is, I'm a Christian myself. Like, I was raised in the Baptist church, and that's something that on a personal level, me and James have bonded over and talked about a lot. And it genuinely is a part of who he is, I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to him or he's reached out to me, and it's like, hey, I saw this, like, let me pray for you. Like, let me talk to you about
Wow.
this. Like, it is genuinely who he is as a person. And it's not lip service. Like, it is that, like, what you see of his talk about Christianity, that is who James Talarico is. And that's why I have found myself in this unfortunate position of, I have two people who I personally know, who I personally worked with, running in this primary against each other. And I've made it clear to my followers that I'm going to cover this primary fairly. And when we get closer to election day, I will be public about who I'm voting for, because I am every single year. And this year's not any different. So, but yeah, I think either way, like, to your point, it's got to be someone who's going to be able to kick Ken Paxton's ass. And I think the Texas primary voters are smart enough to make that decision for themselves.
I wanted to quickly follow up before we kind of switched gears, because I wanted to ask you, though, it doesn't escape the obvious notice, though, that James Tallarico is a white male. And I do think, of course, we still labor in states like Texas and Florida and others, right, with this kind of viability of candidates when they're white men, right, versus women of color, et cetera. That makes me kind of always kind of stop and consider this. And then you look at somebody like James and you see white male Christian, and it's almost like the triple threat, right? The triple threat candidate. And it makes me wonder, though, if you took that personality and you took that James Tallarico energy and you put it in a black female or a black male, would you still get the same response, Olivia? And of course, that's more rhetorical to you than rhetorical than anything, right? But I would be curious to see that, because I do feel like we are unfortunately still living, and this kind of dovetails a little bit with Kamala Harris's book, right? I think sadly we're still living. Yeah, and somebody just said right now, Stacey Abrams, for example, right? Yet another exceptional speaker. I don't know if you've ever been, Olivia. I'm very privileged to say that I've become friends with Stacey Abrams, and I've been in rooms when she has spoken, and the way that she speaks is just uplifting, inspiring, and just all of those things. And she is also a woman of faith, right? And I just kind of wonder, is that the reason why James is such the triple threat, that he's white, male, and Christian versus being gay, male, and maybe not Christian, right? I always just kind of think about these things, because I wonder, because we always have to be honest about our assessments of where politics is today. And I am also, admittedly, a Machiavellian about some things. I believe that we have to be back in the positions to have control of the levers of power to make things right again. And we just got to get the hell there. We got to get there, folks, no matter how the hell we're going to get there, right? And if it takes supporting the white male Christian who is genuine and good and will do right by us, then that's maybe what we have to do. I'm not saying that you're endorsing anything. I guess what I'm just trying to say is, it didn't escape my notice, though, right, that he's white and male and Christian. Just something that I wanted to express right now.
Well, to your point, Charlie Kirk was also white male and Christian, and he was an incredibly effective messenger for the Republican Party. And, I wrote about this at length. I think a lot of people misinterpret just how important he actually was to them. Charlie Kirk was able to tour all of these colleges and universities, and I think something a lot of people miss in their characterization of him is that it's not just that Charlie Kirk was a young man speaking to young men. It's that Charlie Kirk was a model of what young men aspire to be. He was a successful businessman. He had a beautiful wife, beautiful children. He was a man of faith. He talked about his faith consistently. He could talk about cultural things like basketball or football or music. And I think that what we learn from that, and what we see come from people like James Tallarico and Gavin Newsom, is that the best people to message to kind of the coalitions that we've lost are people who those coalitions can see themselves in. So we're in a position right now where we're struggling with young men. We are struggling to bring young men back into the Democratic Party. Well, how many people do we have who those young men feel like they can see themselves in? And I think that James Tallarico is a good example. He is someone who a lot of these people who we have struggled to bring into the Democratic Party fold could potentially see themselves in and feel represented by in voting for him as a candidate.
Well, which is why I think James Tallarico going and sitting with Joe Rogan, for example, and others has been a particularly powerful thing. I just get worried because
that scared people, by the way. I went to a young conservatives conference in the Woodlands this past weekend.
Yeah. Which is on the outskirts of Houston, by the way, folks, if you don't know where the Woodlands are.
And I was talking to some of my, the Republicans I know and some of my sources, and they were telling me, like, they are genuinely concerned about the Rogan appearance that Tallarico made, and that independents who they know are talking about this James Tallarico guy. So, like, it's not lip service. Like, him going on Joe Rogan and performing well, like, it is something that has Republicans in Texas ears ringing with concern.
Yeah, which is why Pete Buttigieg going and doing well in those places, I think, is very helpful for our party. I just think, Charlie Kirk, I think everybody's trying to maybe figure out what that secret sauce was, because for a lot of us, he said he was a Christian, but for a lot of us, he was not a man of Christ. For a lot of us, he may have called himself a Christian, but he was not a man of Christ. Quoting scripture doesn't make you a Christian either. I know a lot of people that can quote scripture, but their hearts are not Christian. So I think that, but again, and you can call me Machiavellian, I'll own it. I'm prepared to do what it takes to get the right people in office, to get our norms and institutions back. And again, to be controlling the levers of power so we can do right and good by all of us and the communities that need it the most. And that is something that I am willing to invest in. And I think that that is something that we now need to reconsider. I think that is part of the realignment of the party right now. Again, one of the biggest takeaways for me for November was realizing that our traditional institutions have failed us and we cannot rely upon them anymore. I have been talking about it a lot here on Substack and in other places. We cannot trust our electeds in DC as a whole to take care of us anymore. The disconnect is too profound. I'm also upset by the lionization, making them celebrities, those that have been elected to be our mouthpieces in DC. They're not doing that. They're more concerned about their job preservation than anything. So I think that if we find authentic candidates that, again, you see yourself in, which is to your point, even maybe independents, maybe even conservative young men see themselves in somebody like James Tallarico, then the better for us. The better for us as Democrats and as Americans to get the right people. I like also that James is thinking bigger. I've seen a lot of people, and I've questioned them on my show, interviewed them on my show, on my YouTube channel. They are going from federal jobs, right, national positions, to local and state positions. I welcome them to do that. I am a big fan of that, as y'all know. But I do appreciate somebody of the caliber of James Tallarico looking bigger and taking his talents, his mission, his message to Washington. I feel like that would be a really powerful thing for all of us across the United States.
I agree. I think that we are at a serious impasse within the Democratic Party of where we need to go. And I think a common thread I've seen is it seems that nobody wants to take accountability. Nobody wants to take accountability for the fact that, we lost the 2024 election. Nobody wants to take accountability for the fact that we are losing people within our multiracial coalition. And it seems that everyone wants to point fingers towards the past and whose fault it was, but nobody wants to point fingers towards the future and what we need to do in order to progress. And I have to say, I think it's very telling that you have, I think it's over a dozen Democratic candidates who are running for Senate who have gone on record saying they would not vote for Chuck Schumer to be majority leader. I think that's extremely telling. And I'm not saying that, Chuck Schumer is bad at whipping or counting votes. There's a legislative aspect to this that, frankly, Chuck Schumer is talented at. But when it comes to the actual messaging of where the Democratic Party is, the Democratic Party does not have a leader right now. It does not have someone who is guiding the ship. We have a bunch of people who are on the crew who are shouting different directions, but nobody is guiding the ship. And we need to hone in and focus on the fact that if you ask someone, what makes the Democratic Party the Democrats? Why are Democrats Democrats? What is different about them? You can't get a consistent, concrete answer on anything except two policies: abortion and healthcare. Those are the only two things that we've consistently come to be able to talk about in our party. And unfortunately for us, those two issues are not in the top 3 to 4 issues that decide people's votes every single election cycle. So we need to get to the point.
I don't hear economy. I haven't heard economy.
I don't hear economy. I don't hear economy. And, you know, we have to have uncomfortable conversations about that. We have to take accountability about that. You know, I'm not someone who's extremely powerful within the party dynamic, but what I'll say is this is, you know, I used to pick fights. I used to pick fights a lot with people on the left who I thought were being divisive, who I thought were causing problems. And I realized there are a lot of people in our Democratic coalition who, it's the alternative. It's, you know, we point the finger and accuse of like, you are being divisive. Progressives are being divisive. But now I see a lot of moderates are doing the same thing where they're like, and I think that the New York mayoral election's a great example of that, is people who are talking about how, you know, Zohran Mamdani is bad for the party and how, you know, they don't want to endorse him. And I'm noticing like you're spending more time beating up on the Democratic nominee in a mayoral election than you are talking about how Republicans in the government are destroying our institutions. And now you have become the same people that you spent all of the last year election cycle criticizing because you're spending your time beating up on Democrats instead of focusing on working to undo the damage Republicans are doing. So that's a whole tangent I have about just me. I've just been thinking about this for the last several weeks of we have to be better. And frankly, the Democratic Party is only as popular as the leaders within it. And we have to seriously think about that long term.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about it a lot because one, you know, having left mainstream media, traditional media, you know, I have this level of independence now, Olivia, where, you know, I can sit and talk and have just long form conversations with people and explore these a little bit deeper. And I will say, just as a person, again, I'm disappointed with our electeds, not all, but the most of them. And I'm, like I said, I think it's worth underscoring. I'm tired of how they've been lionized, right? There's some celebrity to them, and I'm not quite sure how they've earned that to do. And with us having this looming shutdown, I am calling for the Democrats, the Senate Democrats, to not negotiate with the Republicans. There is no good faith that comes from the GOP on this issue. And I do not relish a government shutdown, but I'm willing to take the gamble of us getting blamed for it if it means that we can stop the hemorrhaging. Because that's what's happening right now. Band-Aids aren't going to fix this problem. A continuing resolution will not fix this problem. A temporary balm will not fix this. I think it's time to really, you know, go balls to the wall on this, Olivia. And if that means standing up and saying, I'm not going to fund the continued destruction of America, then I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. And I feel like there's ways that we can help people that are impacted by this government shutdown that happen to be in our corner. But I've also found that because we can't trust our bigger institutions right now to help us, we have to dig in our heels and take care of each other. And part of that is having these kinds of conversations where we're very honest, as you say. I had somebody tell me today, I haven't seen them in so long, and they told me something that just really hit me hard in a good way because it opened my eyes. I said, you know, since 2016, I have been moving more and more left, which I found to be remarkable. As somebody who was previously a registered Republican, I became a no-party affiliation in 2016 when Trump took over the office, and then I became a Democrat in 2018 during a specific event when Donald Trump stood next to Vladimir Putin and said that he didn't believe American intelligence. I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to be a Democrat to be active. But she said something to me, Olivia. She said, Katie, did you ever stop and think that actually it's not your views or your positions that have become more radicalized? Perhaps it's the fact that the norms have moved farther and farther right.
Yep.
That you feel like you've become more progressive and radicalized when in reality it's not. Your support of social benefits, right? Your support of health care for people, affordable health care, your support for these things, Katie, these are not radical concepts. Those are just things that reflect who you are. It's the fact that the constant negotiations by traditional Democrats, right, with the Republicans have slid the entire framing, our entire window of perspective, Olivia, has moved farther right. So for those of us that are sitting here and calling for good and healthy democracies and democratic institutions and good things for all Americans, these are not radical progressive things. These are just things that should just be done. And it really stopped me dead in my tracks, Olivia, because she's right. What we ask for is not radical. It is not radical to make sure that we have affordable health care. It's not radical to make sure that there's Social Security benefits for those of us that have been working for so long. It's not radical to want to make sure that my elderly mother gets the help that she needs, right? Or that there's childcare, or that our kids get school lunches when they can't afford them. Why is that a radical concept? It's not. It's because the window of perception has slid so far right because we have constantly negotiated with the Republicans. And the thing that makes me mad, Olivia, is they would never fucking negotiate with us.
Yep.
Why are we going hand in hand? I am embarrassed. What do you mean we have to ask for meetings with the president? Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. I don't have to sit there, go hand in hand to go try to spend some time with you. I don't need your fucking crumbs. It's that mentality that we have in DC that is getting us deeper and deeper into this hole, which is why, again, if we have candidates that are going to go and rattle those cages and make it better, then heck with it. Let's do it. Let's do it, my friend. You know, I'm all for that.
Yeah. And, you know, to your point.
Sorry, I went off. Sorry.
No. I mean, we need it. People need to hear, you know, where people like us stand on this. And I think you're right. Of the Republicans control all three chambers of government. They control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the White House. So the burden of keeping the government open through negotiations, it is not on Democrats. It is on Republicans. If John Thune needs Republicans to, or he needs Democrats to vote for cloture in the Senate, then it is the responsibility of John Thune to go to Chuck Schumer, to go to the Democratic caucus and ask, what would you do? What would it take to get you to vote for this continuance resolution and to vote for cloture? What would it take? And the Democrats have made their demands. They're talking about the healthcare subsidies that are involved in the ACA. We know what Democrats want. It polls popularly what Democrats are demanding. And yet we are still trying to go to the Republicans who have made it clear they do not want to talk to us. So I don't need 5 press conferences a day where our leadership is saying, well, you know, we tried to have a meeting with them and they don't want to talk to us. Because what are you saying? You are saying that you are the leader of the Democratic caucus and that your colleague does not want to negotiate with you. Then don't negotiate with them.
They have no respect. It's a sign of disrespect. And it's funny because you wouldn't do this. Like, listen, like you wouldn't do this in your quote regular life.
No.
If you had somebody in your life that you needed to be negotiating with over something and they refused to even give you the opportunity to have a conversation, you'd cut them out of your life.
Yeah.
Why would you need to have that level of disrespect?
It's a symptom of continuing to act like this is a normal circumstance and that this is normal policy and procedure. Just last week, John Thune and Senate Republicans changed the rules to confirm a mass amount of appointments at one time.
Yeah, the big chunk ones.
The rules. Yeah, the big chunk appointments. They bypassed the rules to do that. That has only been done 3 other times in American history. Only 3 other times have they done that. So they have already shown you that they are bypassing the rules and they're bypassing the procedures. Now, I'm willing to have an honest conversation about what a government shutdown actually looks like. It looks like it could empower Trump more. It could empower the GOP more. It could, make way for recess appointments. But the point is, they're already doing it. Everything that we say they could do in a government shutdown, they're already doing. And so I just don't understand. I don't understand this conversation. I don't understand why we continue to have it. And, I think that Democrats we have to act like this is a new. Oh, the other thing is, people are not stupid. Democrats are not stupid. When we have our elected officials going on television, going on social media, and talking about the reality, which is true, that we are in an authoritarian presidency where they are doing authoritarian and extremist things.
Yep.
How can you say that and then in good conscience aid this government in continuing to act? Because that means either you have lied to your voters or you are severely misunderstanding the severity of the moment that we are in. It makes you look hypocritical. It makes it look like you do not understand what's going on. And furthermore, it seems insincere. To me, when I see our Democratic leadership talking about a shutdown and how they're fighting to keep the government open, it comes off as insincere because they want to keep the government closed because they don't want to do that. They're not comfortable with going against the norms. They're not used to doing that. And so it comes off as insincere. I don't think voters are going to buy it. And frankly, at this point, because of how this has been set up messaging wise, I think whether the government closes or the government stays open, either way, Democrats are going to get blamed, even though Republicans control all three chambers of the government.
Ergo, the reason why I say, and I'm not being flippant or dismissive for those that will be impacted by this, but it's time. It's time to play hardball. It's not an exclusive thing to Republicans to be able to do this. I also think for those that will be impacted by this shutdown, it's time for us to help our friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
If that happens. That's what we do. That's what makes us different than the other side. We will take care of each other in the event that we have to. And it won't be easy, but we can do this. And I know we can. And I feel like I'm hearing this, by the way, and I don't know if you've heard this also, Olivia, but I had somebody share this with me who was at the Congressional Black Caucus today. They were on a panel, and this is what I was told, that Congressman Glenn Ivey said, and I'm reading it, during the panel, that Pete Hegseth is calling all of those generals to show up next week so that he can tell them that in the event of a government shutdown, that they're going to declare martial law.
I had not heard that. That is terrifying.
That is the reason why Pete Hegseth is calling all of them to convene next week. Because in the event of a government shutdown, the Trump administration, the federal government will say that we need to declare martial law. If that doesn't tell you, and this came from Congressman Glenn Ivey, and he sourced it to one person at DHS, so y'all take it for what it's worth, right? Sourced to just one person at DHS. But what does it tell you, though, about the state of play? There are no rules of engagement anymore, folks. If you can live in a country with an administration that would be willing to declare martial law because the government shuts down, to Olivia's point, even though I call it the power trifecta, House, Senate, and Oval Office, and they control it all, and the government shuts down, and they're going to declare martial law, it will be one of the biggest, most critical moments in American history to see what these military generals do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to test the limits of our democracy if this is true. And I'm not saying this to be an alarmist, Olivia. I just want to level set people's expectations. Yeah. I have to do this, right? I want people to understand that this is a non-functioning government that we currently have. So why fund not only your irrelevancy, that's what I've been telling the members of Congress, why vote to fund your irrelevancy? Because you're clearly irrelevant because you have no powers despite the separation of powers in the branches. You don't have any. You're neutered. You're impotent. Why bother? So I'm telling this because if we don't even have a functioning government, then what's the point of funding it anymore? And that's the way that I'm looking at things right now. And again, don't want to sound alarmist, but I want people to understand we're not playing with the same set of rules anymore.
Yeah.
And if the Republicans are going to act this way and be this way, then we need to be prepared to do what we need to do to get the job done.
And, this is one of those moments where most people do not understand the moment that we are actually in. They do not understand it. And maybe if something like that happened, and I think the Jimmy Kimmel thing is a great example. I feel like that was the first big blip of people starting to pay attention and go, wait a minute, something's happening here. And, maybe if that does happen, people finally wake up and realize what the hell is going on in this country.
Listen, and I've been screaming from the rafters about this James Comey stuff. I covered it on my channel earlier today. I know James Comey may not have has so much maybe cultural or pop impact as Jimmy Kimmel does, right? But I will say, I represent Karen Attiah now as well. She got wrongfully terminated from the Washington Post. There are people that are being silenced because they express their opposition. And that's also not the sign of a healthy democracy. And somebody said the other day, so acutely so, they were like, when you're sick, you go and you get treatment. Our government is sick. Our body politic is sick, people. It needs to be fixed. Continuing to fund its sickness makes no fucking sense. It's like, oh, you have alcoholism. Let's give you some more alcohol to continue to help you drink more. I don't know about you, Olivia. I didn't do that. I know you have a hard stop. I know we've been going for a while. I'm grateful for all 1,600 of you that have been hanging out with Olivia and me this afternoon. These are the types of moments where I am so eternally grateful for Substack, one. And two, I'm grateful always for Olivia. She has been a huge North Star for me for many years now, and I'm so proud to be her friend. And I am grateful for this platform and this opportunity and this space to be able to hang out with you, Olivia, and all 1,600 of you. I'm grateful, sincerely.
I love you, Katie. Always happy to talk to you.
And to all of you that have tuned in, it's on this side, the little rolling marquee thing there. If you are not subscribing to Olivia, please go and do so. Show her support. Let her know how much we love her takes and her perspective. Read her posts. They are spectacular. And continue to follow her on social media because she's definitely somebody who's in the know.
Thank you,
I'm
Katie.
grateful, Olivia. Enjoy. Have a safe and healthy weekend to all of you. I will see y'all very soon.
Same.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.